do squats first, your leg press will suffer. If you do leg press first, your squats will suffer. You'll have to figure out, what do I do first in order to properly arrange your training so that you're not disappointed that you did poorly on a movement, even though it was third and you only would have done really well on it if it was first. So you got to kind of know what you want. Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength. Today, we're going to talk about exercise order, but we are going to talk about how it's different for naturals and for enhanced folks. So we're going to talk about exercise order in general, and then have two use cases, if you're natty or if you're enhanced. A little different here, and it really accounts for a lot of the differences of how pros train versus how you might be able to be training by yourself. Copying the pros is not wise. You want to learn from the pros and take what you need out of their programs, not just copy them verbatim, because a lot of the stuff they do is because they're enhanced. So let's look into it. Why does order matter? Which exercises you do first, second, third, etc. Let's talk about some facts, I would say, high likelihoods here, and then we're going to overlay them into natty versus enhanced recommendations. Order matters in some of the following ways. First, you'll have the most energy on first exercises. You got something that requires a crap load of your energy to put in, it had better be early because you're not tired yet. Next, if performance is your goal on a certain exercise, then it also better be early because you'll perform best on first exercises when you're not tired. If you got squats first versus leg extensions first, you want to perform highly on squats, you're going to do squats first. First exercises will generally get the highest stimulus compared to later exercises for that exercise. So if you want a huge squatting stimulus, do it first. If you want a huge leg press stimulus, do that first instead of squats. First exercises will make the muscles trained more likely to be limiting factors on later exercises. So for example, if you do cable pushdowns first for your triceps, and then you dumbbell presses later for triceps and chest, because your triceps are completely fried or very fried from that first pushdown exercise, your triceps are more likely the limiting factor on the presses, which means they get even more work from the presses, leaving your chest getting a little bit less work than it wanted to. So we can do this limiting factor situation. We'll have a way that enhanced lifters can use this to their advantage much later. I'll talk about that. First exercises, because you're not grooving in the session yet, you don't have a pump yet, you haven't been moving around much, are unlikely to give you the best mind-muscle connection. So if there's an exercise that you just raw fucking do, good positioning, good movement, and you get really strong in it, put that first instead of an exercise that you really want an awesome mind-muscle connection with, but you struggle to get one maybe on that exercise. I would save that for later when you're already pumped, when you're already moved around a little bit, nice and way warmed up. The mind-muscle connection is better saved for later exercises. First exercises will reduce overall performance on later exercises. Thus, you have to make a choice. You can't say, well, I want squats and leg press to both be really good. You can in the grand scheme, but not in a given workout. If you do squats first, your leg press will suffer. If you do leg press first, your squats will suffer. So you'll have to figure out, what do I do first in order to properly arrange your training so that you're not disappointed that you did poorly on a movement, even though it was third and you only would have done really well on it if it was first. So you got to kind of know what you want. Next, and lastly, for this section, for beginners especially, whatever exercises you do first and early will improve in technique much more than exercises you do later, because technique has a fatigue component. If you're learning while you're highly fatigued, you're not learning technique nearly as well. So if you're a personal trainer or if you're a beginner trainer yourself, and you really want to master an exercise like squats, and leg extensions are pretty straightforward. You don't need a lot of technical background to learn them. Do squats first, because then you'll be really good at learning them when they're fresh. Don't do leg extensions first and then squats after, because your ability to learn squats will be a little bit degraded. All right. So for the natties, what does that mean for exercise order recommendations? Kind of taking all that in together. I would recommend that you put exercises earlier in your program. I don't mean first, second, third, whatever's early for you, anywhere earlier, that meet 4 conditions. Not all conditions, but at least one of the 4. First, you want to put in exercises that you want to improve the most on in performance. If it really matters to you how much you squat, squats better be first. Number 2, put exercises earlier that you feel stimulate your most high priority muscles the best. If I'm serious about getting big biceps, I'm doing bicep exercises first. Not back, not shoulders, not shit, biceps. That makes a lot of sense. Number 3, you want to put in exercises earlier that require the most coordination and focus. If you're doing some kind of program which requires some overhead pressing, takes a lot of focus and coordination to get it right. If it's a standing barbell press, I do that first. You do that shit later, you're going to be more fatigued. Various muscles are going to be pre-exhausted. Coordination and focus is going to be a thing that's not as available. So if you really need a lot of coordination and focus to get a real technical exercise done real well, so you can do well within your program, I'd put it a little early in the program rather than later. And very importantly, exercises that you want to go stronger on, especially in the low rep ranges, sets of 3 to 6, sets of 5 to 10, put them earlier into your program. If you put in sets of 5 to 10 later in your program, yeah, it's sets of 5 to 10, but you're so exhausted, it's really with a load that fresh you could have lifted for 10 to 15 or even more repetitions. If real strength matters to you, you're going to train heavier earlier in your exercises than later, almost every single time. So this list means that for natties, they can train isolations first, but can also do heavy compounds first. And it's really going to be a matter of which one fits the bill best. And for natties, a lot of times heavy compounds are going to win that battle. Not all the time, but much of the time. What about later? Which exercises for natties are ones they want to prioritize later rather than earlier? I can think of at least 2 situations here. You want to put exercises later that have a large systemic or cardiovascular component. Let's say ultra high rep walking lunges. Like, if you do them first, you're just going to be so goddamn exhausted, everything else is going to kind of suck. You do a ton of high rep lunges, multiple sets of 40, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to do stiff-legged deadlifts, but I can't breathe and my fucking glutes don't work anymore. Fuck that. Whereas if you did high rep walking lunges last, you're super tired and it doesn't matter because you don't need them anymore. You just go home. Next, put exercises later that have limiting factor muscles that will interfere with earlier exercises. If it's really important for you to get a big back, do not train your biceps and rear delts first because they will keep you from being able to use your back musculature nearly as well because they will be limiting factors, not letting your back do as much work. Another one here is if you want to squat and deadlift, you should probably squat first because if you deadlift first, it turns all the other squat sets into a lower back exercise because your spinal erectors will be limiting. No bueno for your legs. So give that some thought. Now, enhanced exercise order. When you're no longer natty, what do you do? And here's the reminder on this one. Enhanced means a few things. 2, really, that we want to use to design our program. One is enhanced means a higher injury risk at any given time. Steroids do a good job of making your muscles bigger, but not nearly as good of a job of making your tendons bigger. And even if they make your tendons bigger and stronger, they can make the muscles so big that on an absolute scale, they're more likely to pop off the tendon. And you can try harder on steroids. Sometimes you can't stop yourself from trying harder. It makes you nice and psychotic, further increasing the risk of injury. And a lot of times when you're enhanced, you experience rapid regains in strength when you become enhanced again off of just doing TRT. And that can be one hell of a ride. So your injury risk is definitely a bigger concern when you're enhanced rather than when you're natural. However, the enhanced have an advantage. They have an easier time stimulating growth. So they might be okay with trading down a little injury risk for a trade also down of stimulus. But that's not a big deal because the stimulus they can always get, no problem. The injury risk, they have to really be reverent about. So exercises earlier for enhanced folks, I can think of 3 situations. You want to put an exercise earlier, or at least consider doing so if you're enhanced, that train and pre-exhaust the target muscle of the session with the least external load. When you use high external loads, like a huge barbell back squat, your probability of getting hurt is decently high, but you might not even be searing in that target muscle a ton because it's kind of whole body effect. So maybe you can do something like leg presses first, really zaps the quads, do squats after as a second exercise, and now the quads are the limiting factor again. And instead of using 4 plates on the squat, you can use 3. So that net session kept you at least the same stimulus, probably even greater, and decreased the injury risk. So target musculature first, then super hardcore muscles that are super hardcore exercises that require really high external loads after that. In addition to that, point number 2, try to put in exercises earlier that are often more isolation movement, or at least not postural movements, anti-gravity movements, like bent rows, like deadlifts, like squats. Save those for later. So leg extensions to start with versus front squats, leg presses versus back squats, things like that. You can use, let's say if you're doing standing dumbbell press for shoulders and triceps, do some push downs first, really pre-exhaust the triceps, and then the postural exercise, you don't have to use as much load, and you'll get a good workout from that, a good stimulus much quicker. And put in exercises earlier, and this sounds weird, but it's true. Here's that injury reduction thing. They're in the 10 to 20 rep range, not the 5 to 10. You can still do the 5 to 10 rep range in later exercises where the load on the bar, fresh, is really more like 10 to 15. Why are we doing this? It's not doing us any favors in strength, but the absolute load you use is smaller, so thus the injury risk is substantially less. Remember, gaining muscle on steroids is not that hard, or in other words, not as hard as it is natty. Even sets of 20 to start out with are amazing for hypertrophy, and sets of 5 to 10 are cool later. If you wanted to optimize for being natty, you might flip those two to get the real heavy work in first and light work after. But it might not be worth the injury risk. Some enhanced folks are squatting 500, 600, 700 pounds for reps, benching 300, 400, or 500 pounds for reps. Man, I'm trying to do shit in the 10 to 20 rep range if I'm that strong first, so I get nice and tired before I go heavier. Because if I go heavy first, there might not be a later because I'll be broken into fucking pieces. And for enhanced folks, try to put in exercises later on average to your program. Remember, these are all soft rules, not hard rules, that meet, let's say, 4 criteria. One is have shown a higher injury risk to you in the past. So for example, if you've had some trouble with bench press before, or you've hurt your pecs with it before, but you want to do bench press again, do some chest flies first, do some incline dumbbell press the second, and then third, do some bench press. You'll have to use less load. You'll be much more warmed up. You'll be much more in the groove technically. And then all of a sudden, it's much less injurious and you can still benefit a lot from it. Second, put exercises later that you struggle with a mind-muscle connection on. It's easier to get a mind-muscle connection when your muscles are a little bit pre-fatigued. When they have a big pump, it's much easier to feel out that tension and that burn. So save those exercises for later. If there's a back machine you don't super connect on, do some lat prayers first. You get on the back machine, your lats are pre-fatigued a little bit. You can really feel them. Mind-muscle connection might be better. Mind-muscle connection on a fresh exercise, kind of fucking weird. Third, exercises that have a really high systemic fatigue component, you should try to do later, because if you do them first, they'll zap you so much it'll fuck up the rest of your workout. But if you do the less fatiguing systemically exercises first, you can do the real systemic ones last, and then it doesn't matter if you're tired because you're just leaving the gym. Squats fall into this category. Deadlifts fall into this category. Once you go all out for many sets, the systemic fatigue is too high for these to keep going. If you do 5x12 in the squat, really do it, and you're real strong and real enhanced, man, whatever you do after is kind of like, man, you're not really doing shit anymore. You're just going through the motions. But if you do 3 really hard sets of leg extensions, 3 really hard sets of leg presses, and then 3 really hard sets of squats, by the end, squats still fuck you up. They still systemically fuck you, but you have 6 good work sets before that of quads. Not only are you done systemically, but your quads are done. The other way is if you do them first, yeah, your quads are pretty cooked, but they could use more work. But after 5 sets of 12, you're systemically done. You can't do any more work that's of any high quality. Bad way to do that. Lastly, number 4, as an enhanced lifter, you have to be real careful about safety. New exercises you just introduced in your training, you're just playing around with, you're not sure if they fit you, start them later in the plan. Do your core exercises you know work well for you first. Try an exercise 3rd or 4th that's something new you're experimenting with. That way, you can really work on the technique, and you don't have to push your performance to the limits because, like, hey, you're fresh, it's performance time. Early in the workout, performance time. Later in the workout, a little bit more attention to quality time is kind of how you can think about it. So if you like that exercise, within the next mesocycle, you can bring it up to rank 1 or the first priority, first order exercise. But new exercise you're just starting out with, I'd say start out with them later in your plan. 2nd, 3rd, 4th exercise, something like that. It gives you a chance to work out that technique. There's no high pressure for you to perform a ton because you're tired anyway. If you like them, maybe you can move them up. All right. Let's wrap this up for everyone involved in the iron game, so to speak. We got beginner advice, intermediate advice, and advanced advice. For beginners, stay natty. There's nothing about fucking enhancements and anabolics that you need in your life. Do your compound, high technique, high load movements first. You can do some isolations and higher reps last, although for beginners, that's generally not needed. Sets of 5 to 10, compound basics, is probably all you need as a beginner for years to get an unbelievable change in your body. For intermediates, also stay natty. There will be a time for enhancements. The time is not now. It's when you're advanced. You want to determine the net. Sorry, I said that wrong. You want to determine your exercise order, how you structure which exercises are first, last, and in between, by your net session stimulus to fatigue ratio. Which order is going to give you the most stimulus and the least fatigue? And that's a balancing act. All of the tips that I shared with you, you can use and combine it with your own internal knowledge and experimentation to see what kind of exercise order definitely gives you an amazing stimulus, but doesn't make you so fatigued that it makes the whole stimulus maybe not worth the squeeze. A good way to ask a question about this, to try to get your head around this, is to ask, what can stimulate my muscles the most without limiting factors like other muscles or systemic fatigue interfering? If you can answer that question with a good exercise order, you're in the fucking money. Advanced folks need to do the same thing, determine their exercise order by net session SFR through the same process. And they'll probably be quite good at it because they really know what they're doing by then. If advanced folks are also enhanced, they should highly consider pushing lighter, more isolated exercises first into their plan, saving the heavier, more compound movements for later in their plan for injury risk reduction. And it's not a big deal because with extra sets and reps, you can make up the volume and still get an unbelievable stimulus. And especially heavier and tougher compounds go later. Your ego will want you to reverse this. Your ego will say, come on, dude, you're enhanced, bro. You can fucking squat the world. Let's do it now while we're fresh. If it's strength you're looking for, that's absolutely what you should do after a good warm-up. If it's hypertrophy you're looking for, you don't need to do that, and you can way reduce your injury risk by saving those heavy, super technical compounds, squats, deadlifts, etc., for later in your plan, later in the day, third, fourth, some shit like that exercise, not first and second. If you want to learn more about how this whole steroid game works, we have steroid videos. Just say Dr. Mike Israel steroids, RP strength steroids, and you'll find a bunch of stuff on YouTube. Give that a look. Stay away from the needle. Think about exercise order. Let me know some questions in the comments, and I'll catch you guys next time.